How's it going, everybody? I wanted to come at you today, do a little video about one of the things that I picked up recently. I've got a lot more coming, but I wanted to do a special video about this one because I just watched it last night and I was blown the fuck away. Um, I got this movie on sale during the Black Friday sales on Amazon for $9. Originally, I got it for $9.99. Then they dropped it by 99 cents, so I got them to reimburse me that. Freaking awesome, eh? But yeah, winner of 2 Academy Awards and very much a controversial film, Django Unchained. That's right, I finally got Django Unchained. I bought it sight unseen. I had not seen this until just last night when I popped it in and watched it. And usually I don't spend that much money on something that I've never seen, but it's Quentin Tarantino. It's Django Unchained. I've heard nothing but positive things about this movie from people whose opinion I respect. So, I regret nothing. I am so glad that I have this in my freaking collection. This movie is really freaking good. I was just blown away. It was fan fucking tastic. Everything about it was fucking perfect. I mean, from the second the movie started, like just as it trickles along and has that very Tarantino feel, it almost didn't only feel like a Tarantino movie. It also felt very much like a Coen Brothers movie. Honestly, I feel like maybe he was kind of inspired a little bit. Well, maybe he wasn't inspired by the Coen Brothers, but it was honestly a little bit more serious than some of the other stuff that he's done in the past. It was kind of like a more adult version of Quentin Tarantino, which I really liked. Um, I mean, you don't get to see that every day, right? And I just love the little references to I just love the references to spaghetti westerns and all that. I mean, this truly is a spaghetti western, I would say, in my opinion at least. It's not your average spaghetti western. It's definitely on a topic that most westerns were not willing to touch on. But there were scenes in this movie that immediately reminded me of stuff I had seen in Sergio Leone films and to a lesser extent also in Clint Eastwood films like Unforgiven. There were definitely scenes like that in this movie where I was just like blown away by, well, that's a reference to that. That's a reference to that. That's a reference to that. Um, some of the musical choices, I mean, honestly, I might not like them, but everything worked. Everything worked exactly the way that it should have. Which is why I was kind of confused as to why there was any, controversy on this. A lot of people were upset, I guess, because he used the word nigger too many times. And I don't like saying that myself, but in the context of this movie, it is perfectly adequate. It is perfectly legitimate. What somebody said, he said it 168 times or something like that in the movie. Yeah, I believe that. And honestly, you should be surprised they don't say it more because this is set in an era where people were using that term quite fucking frequently. You don't have to like it, but it's historically accurate to have them saying that word that many freaking times. So don't get on anybody's case. Don't get on fucking Quentin Tarantino's case. Oh, he shouldn't have said that in the movie. At least he shouldn't have said that himself as a character, or he shouldn't have written it so many times in the movie. I mean, for fuck's sake. Uh, it's honestly his most adult, realistic film that he's ever done. First of all, and second of all, it's perfectly legitimate during the it wasn't 1850 yet, but it was right before 1850, right? It was like 1849 for the majority of this film, I think. Um, the Civil War had not yet taken place. Okay, There were still slaves. This was still an era of slavery. And in the era of slavery, that term, along with many other hateful terms, was used. It's real. It's legitimate. That actually happened. You don't have to like the fact that it happened. I don't like the fact that it happened, but you do have to recognize and appreciate that it did actually happen. And if somebody's going to be doing a movie based on this era, then yes, they should mention it. And the fact that it hasn't been mentioned in movies set in this era before, or hasn't been mentioned as at least as well as it was in this movie, that's what people should be upset about. Shouldn't be mad at Django Unchained for doing it right. You should be mad at everyone else for doing it wrong. And that goes for some of the best filmmakers of all time, to be quite fucking frank. They didn't touch on this at all. But Quentin Tarantino had the balls to. And, you don't have to like it. You don't have to be happy about it. You can say wasn't right for him to do it. Fuck you. Just fuck you. All right? Who else is going to do it? Who else is going to have the balls to touch on this subject? Who? You just don't want to hear it. You just don't want to hear the reality of what happened. And that's what blew me away about this movie. It's like, yes, there is a lot about it that, it's not as serious. Obviously, you can never watch a Quentin Tarantino movie and everything about it is serious, right? It's not possible. Like the way they touched on the Ku Klux Klan in the movie, I thought that was freaking brilliant, hilarious. I love that Jonah Hill was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. But yeah, I loved the way that they touched on that. The less serious parts were few and far between. Granted, there was a lot of violence, like a lot of realistic violence, but it's not like we haven't seen that in westerns before. That's kind of part of the western. Maybe it's just that you haven't seen many westerns lately because they haven't really been as popular in the last 30 years. But that's just a part of the western. Very violent, lots of bloodshed, especially now in this day and age of what is possible with special effects and whatnot. You better believe there's going to be a lot of freaking bloodshed. And it's going to look ultra fucking realistic, especially when Quentin Tarantino is involved. So, I don't know if that was something that people got upset about. I don't understand why they would. But, I mean, in terms of just getting the era right and respecting history for what it was really like, I feel like they were pretty much dead on with this. Obviously, there were some things don't exactly fit that well. Django becoming a bounty hunter. It might have been possible, but it definitely would not have been probable. And I love that at least, he kind of concedes to that fact when every time anybody who's white sees Django on a horse or something like that, they just flip out. They can't believe what they're even seeing. It's just, it doesn't happen, you know. So, I mean, it's not like he's not giving a nod to the fact that, yeah, this isn't entirely realistic, but he does focus on certain things that are very realistic. One thing that I noticed is that Calvin, the character of Calvin Candy, he is a slave owner and plantation owner. And what Calvin touches on at one point in the film, played brilliantly by Leonardo DiCaprio. Honestly, Leonardo DiCaprio gave me the shivers in one scene in this film. I was literally just like shaking like a leaf because I was just so fucking nervous. And that's why I love the guy. I mean, you can talk all the shit you want to about Leonardo DiCaprio, but let's just be honest here. He's a fucking fantastic actor. He's one of the best actors of this generation, if not like I hesitate to say the best, but he's definitely in the top fucking 5 of this generation. People talk about like how in the past they had so many actors and actresses that you can look back to and say, well, Clark Gable, you can say Marilyn Monroe, you can point out all these, Katharine Hepburn, point out all these fabulous actors and actresses from the golden age of cinema and whatnot. And nowadays, you can't say that about anyone. And I just, whenever somebody tells me that, or somebody tries to tell me that, I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say Leonardo DiCaprio. They ask, uh, can you name even one actor who would be, who 50 years from now will be considered as good as they were? And I legitimately can say Leonardo DiCaprio because he honestly is that fucking good. And I think that future generations are going to look back on his work as being of paramount fucking importance to this era in cinema. But that said, his character Calvin Candy at one point mentions the idea of there being certain African Americans who are more intelligent, more clever than others. He mentions the idea that 1 in 10,000 uh, African Americans is exceptional. Now, I know to a lot of people this isn't very familiar, but W.E.B. Du Bois, there's this guy back in the early 1900s and late 1800s, W.E.B. Du Bois, and he was a black man, and he was kind of one of the early fighters for equal rights, so to speak. But he had been, I would say personally, I feel that he had been affected by his experiences in life as, a black man in this era, to the point where, in trying to make some kind of headway with the white population in America after the Civil War, he came up with the idea of the talented tenth, and he said that the idea of the talented tenth is that there's like a tenth of the black population that is exceptional, and that maybe not all of them are exceptional, but some of them are, and because some of them are, you should give them a chance. And he was one of these people who was not saying that you should give them a chance as a doctor or anything like that. Shouldn't give them any jobs that, are really meaningful or anything, but just give them a chance to do the menial stuff. That the talented tenth will be good at doing the menial stuff. And this was a black man saying this stuff. So as you can imagine, I'm sure there are a lot of African Americans today who are not very, when they look back on his history and read some of the stuff that he came up with, I'm sure, I would have to imagine that they aren't very happy with what he had to say, but it's part of how he grew up. It's part of the world that he lived in, and tells us a lot about the world that he lived in. And that was, late 1800s, early 1900s. So when you put that into perspective, it really helps you to appreciate the fact that, yes, during this time, this was the attitude that people had. And to hear Calvin Candy come up with something that isn't exactly the talented tenth, but kind of references it and, kind of acts as a preface to it, I felt like that was a nod to those who are, knowledgeable in this area, or who have some experience writing or reading or learning about this particular subject. It was kind of a nod to them to say, like, yes, there is a hint of realism in here. Yes, this is how people thought back then. This is how people acted and whatnot. And then you got people like fucking Cat Williams coming out saying, no, it's not realistic. He had no right to say the N-word so many damn times. And he wants to hit Quentin Tarantino the next time he sees him. I'm like, really? And he claims to be like one of the smartest people on the planet too. That's what blew me away. I'm just like, you're that smart, and you can't see how this completely is way more realistic than anything else any other film that's ever been made set in this time frame. You can't see that. Well, maybe not any other film, but for the most part, of many other westerns in particular, This is way more realistic than any other Western set in this time frame, I would say. And if you got an idea of something that might be more realistic in terms of a Western, then please do not hesitate to tell me in the comments below. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot here that is referencing things that actually happened and ideas that people actually had. So I was very surprised to see that, and I honestly I was happy to see it because it's respectful of the uh, actual truth of what actually happened. You know, while at the same time showing us a story of something that probably could not have happened. But Cat Williams also mentioned how would Django have known how to say his or how to spell his name. First of all, you don't know whether or not this new guy that he was with taught him how to read and write. You don't know whether or not um, he was one of the lucky few who was chosen on his plantation in the past to learn how to read and write. Uh, you don't know these things. Now, it's less likely that a male in this situation would have been given the opportunity to learn how to read and write. But it did happen. It did happen, and we know that because there's a lot of African American writing from this time period. If all African Americans during this time period didn't know how to read or write, then how the fuck did they read and write some of the most important, novels and stories and whatnot, and real life events of all time? And I will say this: like there was other things people felt like it was too violent, like it went too far. Um, there's a story I can't remember who wrote it, but there was a story I remember reading 2 or 3 times actually during my collegiate career. And in this story, a man is walking to meet a friend on a plantation, lives on a plantation, and he's walking down a road, and he sees uh, a black man in a cage hanging from a tree. And he looks closer and he notices the black man's eyes have been pecked out by fucking crows. And as he walks by, he hears the guy just begging for water. And he says he's going to go get some water for him. And I can't remember if he does bring him back water, but, you know, it's really fucking scary. And that's like, you want to talk about, oh, that was too harsh, he went too far. No, he didn't. No, he fucking didn't. This stuff actually fucking happened, and you need to fucking accept that. You need to stop acting like this couldn't have happened. It did. It fucking happened. Stop being a dick. It fucking happened. Accept it. Now, did the events in the film happen? No. But could they have happened? Possibly. There are some things that don't make as much sense. Like, obviously, Django becoming a bounty hunter, as I mentioned, a little off-putting, probably not going to happen. Him knowing how to read and write, again, not very likely, but it's still a possibility. But one thing that people had problems with is that his wife in the movie knows how to speak German. She's fluent in German. And people had a problem with that because, like, well, white people, Cat Williams being an example of this, was saying that, they never taught African Americans, they never taught their slaves how to read or write. That's just not true. They did teach their slaves how to read and write sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes they did. So it actually does make quite a bit of sense, especially in the case of a female who is more likely to be a housemaid. When they're in the house with, usually it was the case with the white female leader of the house, so to speak. They usually took pity on them, and because they wanted their slaves to be able to do certain things for them, like dictate and whatnot, and to write down things, take notes and stuff like that from time to time. Yes, they did actually take the approach of actually teaching certain slaves how to read and write, It was generally frowned upon to do this, but at the same time, it did fucking happen. So to say that that's completely impossible, no, it's fairly probable that that part happened. The story of Django, not as probable. But the story of his wife, fairly fucking probable. I mean, legitimately probable. So you can say what you want, but honestly, this felt more real to me than most of the movies that I see that are set in this time period. So, uh, yes, there are ridiculous aspects to it. Yes, it's classic Tarantino, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a little respect for the actual history, and you know that doesn't mean it doesn't try to reflect history as it actually happened. It does so more than most of Tarantino's other works. And if you look at one of his most recent works, past, Inglorious Bastards, you gonna tell me that you expect Quentin Tarantino to get all realistic up in here? He shot fucking Hitler in the face. In the face! Like bloody fucking in your face. You can't miss it. It's all over the goddamn screen. His face is a bloody pile of fucking bullet torn mess. That happened in his movie. So if you're actually expecting him to go completely realistic, then you don't know what the fuck Tarantino is all about, do you? Quite frankly, you should be surprised that he went this fucking realistic with this movie, and probably because he was too afraid to go any less realistic, because if he did, he would have had more people getting all up in arms about it. So, yeah. Got this for $9 on sale, blind buy, and it was fucking worth it. I love this movie. I am going to watch it so many freaking times. If you have some kind of a problem with the movie, then I don't know what to fucking tell you. Chances are you're just full of yourself. You don't want to accept reality. You don't want to accept that stuff like this did actually happen from time to time. And as implausible as some of the story is, for the most part, it is actually kind of plausible. Um, say what you will. It's a fun, awesome movie that does pay some respect to the actual historical accuracies of what happened during that time period. So, yeah, glad to pick this up. Thanks for watching. Got a lot more coming up, and a few more videos of more stuff that I got for Black Friday. I got a lot of stuff for Black Friday, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. Catch you later. Peace.